At 28, Jessica Walker thought she knew her place in her family until Thanksgiving Day changed everything. After years of fulfilling the good daughter role, she discovered a devastating truth: her parents had been systematically excluding her from family gatherings, claiming she wasn't ready to sit with the extended family. What they didn't expect was that their rejection would lead to Jessica uncovering decades of family secrets that would eventually bring their carefully constructed hierarchy crashing down. Before I dive into this story, where are you watching from today? If you're enjoying family drama stories like this one, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more family revenge tales coming your way. Now let's get into how I discovered my family's darkest secret and the sweet karma that followed. Growing up in suburban Boston, I never questioned the way my family operated. My parents, Richard and Margaret Walker, had established clear rules about how our family functioned. Dad, a corporate attorney, and Mom, a hospital administrator, had created what appeared to be the perfect upper-middle-class American family. My older brother Michael was the golden child, Harvard-educated successful surgeon, married to his college sweetheart with two perfect children. Then there was me, Jessica, the perpetual disappointment. From an early age, I recognized the difference in how my parents treated us. Michael received praise for every accomplishment, while my achievements were met with lukewarm acknowledgement. "That's nice, Jessica," they'd say, before quickly redirecting the conversation to Michael's latest triumph. I'd graduated with honors from Boston University with a degree in computer science, landed a great job at a tech startup, and recently been promoted to senior developer. Yet somehow, in my parents' eyes, I never quite measured up. The Walker family operated on an unspoken hierarchy. At the top sat my father, the patriarch whose word was law. Next came my mother, who enforced my father's decisions with unwavering loyalty. Michael occupied the tier below them, the heir apparent to the family legacy. And at the bottom was me, forever trying to climb higher on the ladder of family approval. Extended family gatherings had always been a big deal in the Walker household. Thanksgivings, Christmases, Easter brunches, these were elaborate affairs where appearance mattered above all else. Everyone dressed impeccably, conversation topics were carefully curated, and family accomplishments were paraded before relatives like trophies. My cousin Eliza once described it as less of a family gathering and more of a performance. For years, I played my part dutifully. I wore the right clothes, said the right things, and swallowed my frustrations when my parents interrupted my stories to redirect attention to Michael. I'd watch as aunts, uncles, and cousins nodded approvingly at my parents' careful orchestration of family dynamics. I convinced myself this was normal, that all families had their hierarchies and roles. Last year, at 27, I'd begun dating Sam, a software engineer who didn't come from the same privileged background as my family. He was brilliant, kind, and noticed things about family dynamics that I'd been conditioned to ignore. It's strange how your parents always position you away from the main conversations, he observed after meeting them for the first time. And have you noticed how they never let you finish a story? Sam's observations made me increasingly aware of my family's treatment. I started noticing patterns I'd previously accepted as normal. How my mother would subtly guide me away from conversations with certain relatives. How my father would interrupt me mid-sentence if I began discussing anything that didn't align with the family narrative. How Michael's wife Amanda would give me sympathetic glances across the dinner table when particularly egregious slights occurred. As Thanksgiving approached last year, I decided to address these dynamics directly. I called my mother a week before the holiday to discuss my concerns. "Mom, I've noticed something over the years," I began carefully. "I feel like I'm often kept separate from the family during gatherings. Is there a reason for that?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before my mother cleared her throat. "Jessica, dear, you've always been. It's different." Some family conversations require a certain level of maturity and understanding that you haven't quite developed yet. I was stunned. Mom, I'm 27 years old. I have a successful career and pay my own bills. How am I not mature enough? It's not about age, Jessica. It's about being ready to participate in the family in the way we expect. Your brother understood this early on. The comparison to Michael stung as it always did. What exactly do I need to do to be ready? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. That's something your father and I have discussed at length. We feel that until you've settled down properly, perhaps if things with Sam become more serious, you're not quite ready to participate fully in family gatherings. The implications were clear. My worth in the family was tied to conforming to their expectations of marriage and lifestyle, not my own accomplishments or character. Something inside me shifted in that moment. A lifetime of accepting second-class status in my family suddenly felt unbearable. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. And what does Dad think about this? He agrees completely. In fact, he suggested that perhaps this Thanksgiving you might be more comfortable staying home. Just until you're ready. For the first time in my life, rather than acquiescing to preserve family harmony, I decided to stand my ground. If I'm not welcome at the full family gathering, then I won't come at all. My mother's relief was palpable. That might be for the best, dear. We'll have you over another time when it's just the four of us. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment trembling with a mixture of anger and revelation. I called Sam, who listened with growing outrage as I recounted the conversation. Jess, that's not normal family behavior, he said firmly. What they're doing is emotional manipulation and exclusion. No one should be treated that way by their own family. That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through social media looking at photos from past family gatherings. For the first time, I noticed the patterns in the images, how I was always positioned at the edge of group photos, how in candid shots I was often alone or looking on from a distance while the rest of the family engaged with each other. Had I been blind to this my entire life, or simply unwilling to acknowledge the truth? The next morning, I received a text from my brother's wife, Amanda. Heard you're not coming for Thanksgiving. Can we meet for coffee? There are things about the family you should know. This unexpected outreach from Amanda, who had always been friendly but never particularly close to me, sparked both curiosity and apprehension. What did she know about my family that I didn't? And why, after 7 years of marriage to Michael, was she choosing now to reach out? I agreed to meet her, having no idea that this coffee date would be the first step toward unraveling the elaborate web of secrets my family had been hiding for decades. Amanda suggested we meet at a small cafe far from the usual spots where we might run into family members. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, nervously fidgeting with her wedding ring. I'd always viewed Amanda as the perfect daughter-in-law, poised, accomplished, and seemingly fully accepted into the Walker family fold in ways I never had been. Seeing her anxious made me instantly alert. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. I've wanted to have this conversation for years, but the timing never seemed right. "What's this about, Amanda?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Does Michael know you're meeting me?" She shook her head. "No, and I'd prefer to keep it that way for now. Michael is complicated. He knows what happens in the family isn't right, but he's benefited from the system for so long that he can't bring himself to challenge it." I ordered a coffee and waited for her to continue, curious about what this perfectly put-together woman could possibly be nervous about. "I need to tell you about the first time I was excluded from a Walker family gathering," she said. "It was before Michael and I were married. Your parents told Michael I wasn't ready to participate in the family Easter celebration. They suggested he come alone. The parallel to my situation was striking. What happened? Unlike you, I didn't have years of conditioning to accept their judgment. I was furious. I confronted your father directly and told Michael if he went without me, our relationship would be over. Amanda's hands trembled slightly around her mug. Your father backed down, but that night at dinner he took me aside and explained the Walker family rules. He said every family member has to earn their place at the table. Earn their place? What does that even mean? I asked, though a lifetime of experiences was starting to align into a disturbing pattern. Control, Amanda said simply. It's about who controls the family narrative and resources. Your parents, particularly your father, have been doing this for generations. It's how they maintain power over everyone. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small worn journal. This belonged to your paternal grandmother, Eleanor. Michael doesn't know I have it. I found it when we were helping your parents clean out the attic last year. She slid it across the table. You should read it. It explains a lot about why your family operates the way it does. I took the journal feeling its weight both physically and metaphorically. Why are you showing me this now? Amanda's expression softened. Because you're finally standing up to them. And because... She hesitated because I'm pregnant again, and I refuse to raise another child in this toxic environment. Something needs to change before this baby arrives. The news of her pregnancy surprised me, as did her candor. Does Michael know you feel this way? I've tried to discuss it with him, but he deflects. He's been molded by your parents since birth to maintain the status quo. But I've seen how they treat you, Jessica. I've watched for years as they've systematically undermined your confidence and excluded you. The same patterns are starting to emerge with our son Thomas. Your parents are already creating divisions favoring him over our daughter Emily because she's two-spirited, code for not easily controlled. I felt a chill run through me. The idea that this pattern could continue into the next generation was disturbing. What exactly do you think I can do? Amanda leaned forward. Read the journal. There are family secrets your parents have kept hidden, financial matters, past relationships, decisions that affected all of your lives. Knowledge is power in the Walker family, and they've deliberately kept you in the dark. She checked her watch. I need to pick up the kids from their play date. Read the journal and call me when you're ready to talk again. As she stood to leave, she paused. One more thing, check your childhood bedroom at your parents' house if you can get in there alone. Look behind the loose baseboard under the window. Your grandmother left something there for you specifically. Before I could ask what she meant, Amanda was gone, leaving me with a worn journal and more questions than answers. I ordered another coffee and opened the journal, not knowing that its contents would forever change my understanding of my family. Eleanor Walker's journal detailed decades of family manipulation. My grandfather, it seemed, had been just as controlling as my father, creating elaborate tests of loyalty and excluding family members who didn't comply with his vision. My grandmother had been his unwilling accomplice at first, but over time had developed small acts of resistance. The most surprising revelation was that my father had an older sister named Catherine, who had been effectively erased from family history after she refused to comply with my grandfather's demands about her choice of husband. The journal entries became increasingly urgent in the final pages, written shortly before my grandmother's death when I was just 5 years old. Richard is becoming just like his father. I see it in how he treats little Jessica differently from Michael. History is repeating itself, and I feel powerless to stop it. I've left items for both my grandchildren, evidence they may need someday to break this cycle. For Michael, I've left the truth about his inheritance. For Jessica, I've left the key to understanding why she's been chosen as the family scapegoat. It's in the one place no one ever looks, her own room beneath the floorboard that always creaked. I closed the journal, my mind racing. I had vague memories of my grandmother, a kind woman who snuck me extra cookies and told me stories when my parents weren't around. Had she recognized something in me, even then? Had she somehow known I would one day need to uncover the truth? I knew what I needed to do. Thanksgiving was 2 days away. My parents believed I would be staying home alone nursing my hurt feelings. Instead, I would use their absence to search my childhood bedroom and discover what my grandmother had left behind for me nearly 23 years ago. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We're having the turkey delivered from Morton's this year. Your father thinks it's more elegant than homemade. We'll expect everyone around 2 p.m. on Thursday. Hope you find something nice to do with your day, dear." The dismissive message only strengthened my resolve. For the first time in my life, I was glad to be excluded from the Walker family Thanksgiving. It would give me the opportunity I needed to uncover the truth that had been hidden from me for decades. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke early with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I texted Sam to let him know my plans. He had offered to spend the holiday with me, but I needed to do this alone. I waited until 10 a.m. when I knew my family would be busy with Thanksgiving preparations to drive to my parents' suburban home. I still had a key as I occasionally stopped by to water plants when they traveled. The house would be empty until evening, as my parents always spent Thanksgiving Day at my Aunt Linda's larger home across town. The familiar driveway felt different as I pulled in, less like coming home and more like infiltrating enemy territory. I used my key to enter through the side door, listening carefully to confirm the house was empty. The silence was broken only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of my father's prized grandfather clock in the hall. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, passing the immaculate family photos lining the stairwell. Every image showed the perfect Walker family, smiling, successful, united. Yet now, with my grandmother's journal fresh in my mind, I noticed the positioning in each photo: my father central and dominant, my mother slightly behind him. Michael prominently placed beside my father and me, always slightly apart. Sometimes with my mother's hand on my shoulder in what I now recognized as a restraining rather than comforting gesture. My childhood bedroom had been converted to a guest room shortly after I left for college, but much of the original structure remained unchanged. The pale blue walls had been repainted a neutral beige, my colorful bedspread replaced with an elegant cream duvet, my posters and mementos removed in favor of generic watercolor landscapes. Still, the bones of my childhood sanctuary remained. I knelt by the window, running my fingers along the baseboard until I found what I was looking for, a section that gave slightly under pressure. I pried it loose, carefully revealing a small cavity in the wall. Inside was a metal lockbox, dusty with age but intact. My heart racing, I pulled it out and examined it. There was no key, but the lock seemed simple enough. I retrieved a hairpin from my purse and, channeling skills from a misspent adolescence, managed to pick it open after several attempts. Inside the box were several items: a sealed envelope addressed to me in my grandmother's elegant handwriting, a small leather-bound book that appeared to be another journal, a USB drive that seemed out of place given its modernity compared to the other items, and a set of documents bound with a faded ribbon. I decided to read the letter first. "My dearest Jessica," it began. "If you are reading this, then you have begun to question the family structure that has been imposed upon you. I always saw myself in you, the questioning spirit, the unwillingness to simply accept what you're told. These are qualities to be cherished, though the Walker family has always sought to suppress them." The letter continued, explaining that my grandmother had recognized early on that I had been designated as the family scapegoat, the role her own sister-in-law, Catherine, had occupied in the previous generation. According to my grandmother, the Walker family dynamic required someone to serve as the outsider, the example of what happens when you don't conform to family expectations. This role was assigned not based on any failing of the individual, but rather on perceived independence and strength of character. Your grandfather selected your father as his successor because Richard was willing to uphold family traditions without question. I believe your father has chosen Michael for the same reason. But you, my dear Jessica, like Catherine before you were born, questioning. This family sees that as dangerous, but I see it as your greatest strength. The leather journal contained my grandmother's more personal thoughts, documenting specific instances where she had witnessed my grandfather and later my father manipulating family members. There were detailed accounts of family meetings I had never known about, financial decisions made without consulting those affected, and a systematic approach to keeping certain family members dependent while elevating others to positions of authority. Most shocking were the documents tied with ribbon. They included financial records showing that my grandfather had established trust funds for all his grandchildren, not just Michael as I had always been told. According to the paperwork, I had a trust fund equal to my brother's, but my father had been named trustee until I turned 30 or met specific conditions: marriage to an appropriate spouse and demonstration of family loyalty. My father had effectively hidden this inheritance from me while using the promise of it to control Michael. The USB drive contained scanned copies of all these documents, along with recorded conversations my grandmother had secretly captured between my father and grandfather discussing their plans for controlling the family wealth and dynamics. There was even a recent addition, apparently added by someone else after my grandmother's death, of emails between my parents discussing how to keep me from learning about my trust fund and their strategies for maintaining what they called proper family hierarchy. As I sat on the guest room floor surrounded by evidence of decades of manipulation, I felt a strange calm replace my initial shock. Everything suddenly made sense: the differential treatment, the constant undermining, the exclusion from family gatherings. It had never been about my worth as a person. It had been about control. I was excluded not because I wasn't good enough, but because I was seen as a threat to the established order. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Are you okay? Did you find it?" I quickly responded, "Found everything. It's worse than I imagined. Need to think about next steps." Her reply came seconds later. "Michael and the kids are already at your aunt's house. I told them I had a migraine and would come later. Can I meet you?" I hesitated only briefly before responding, "Yes, but not here. Meet me at my apartment in an hour." I carefully repacked the lockbox, leaving the baseboard loose but not noticeably disturbed. I needed to preserve the element of surprise. As I was about to leave, I noticed something I hadn't seen before: a small carved inscription on the inside of the baseboard. "Truth sets us free. E.W." My grandmother's final message to me. With renewed determination, I slipped out of the house with my treasures, ready to plan my next move. This Thanksgiving, I had discovered the truth about my family, and I was not about to let another holiday pass with these secrets intact. You know what's crazy? As I was driving away from my childhood home with all this evidence, I couldn't help but wonder if any of you have ever discovered family secrets that changed everything. It's like your entire history gets rewritten in an instant. If you're finding this story relatable or shocking, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'm posting new family drama stories every week, and trust me, this one's just getting started. Now, let me tell you what happened next when Amanda came over. Amanda arrived at my apartment looking anxious but determined. She had clearly left in a hurry, her usually perfect hair pulled back hastily, wearing jeans and a sweater rather than her typical polished attire. When I showed her the contents of the lockbox, she wasn't surprised. "I suspected something like this," she said, carefully examining the trust documents. "Michael mentioned once when he'd had too much to drink that your father had made him promise never to tell you about the family arrangements. I assumed it was about inheritance, but this is far more calculated than I imagined." We spent the next hour reviewing everything, creating a timeline of deception that spanned 3 generations of Walkers. Amanda filled in gaps from her own experiences, revealing how my father had subtly threatened Michael's position when he'd considered taking a job in California instead of joining my father's friend's law firm in Boston. The pattern was clear: financial and emotional manipulation to keep everyone in their assigned roles. The question now, I said, pouring us each a glass of wine, is what to do with this information. Amanda twisted her wedding ring nervously. Michael won't take this well. He's benefited from this system his entire life, even if he's also been controlled by it. He might not thank us for exposing it. I'm not concerned with gratitude, I replied. This isn't just about my trust fund or being excluded from Thanksgiving. It's about breaking a cycle of manipulation that's being passed down to the next generation. You said yourself you don't want your children raised in this environment. She nodded, determination replacing her anxiety. You're right. So what's the plan? I thought for a moment, considering our options. Direct confrontation would give them time to create explanations or hide evidence. We need to catch them off guard in front of the entire family. Christmas, Amanda said immediately. The annual Walker Christmas dinner. Everyone will be there, aunts, uncles, cousins. Your father always uses it to make his grand statements about family legacy. It was perfect, a month away, giving us time to prepare, but not so long that we might lose our nerve. We spent the next several hours outlining our approach, identifying allies within the extended family who might support us, and deciding which documents would make the strongest case. As evening fell, Amanda's phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Michael asking where she was. She finally responded that she'd gone to pick up medication for her migraine and would be home soon. I should go, she said reluctantly. They'll be back from your aunt's house by now, and Michael will be suspicious if I'm gone too long. Can you maintain normalcy for the next month? I asked. We can't give them any reason to suspect we're planning something. Amanda straightened her shoulders with new resolve. I've been playing the perfect Walker wife for 7 years. I can manage another month. She hugged me tightly before leaving, the first genuine embrace we'd ever shared. We're going to change things, Jessica. For all of us. After she left, I called Sam and asked him to come over. He'd always seen through my family's facade, and I needed his perspective now more than ever. When he arrived and I showed him everything we'd discovered, his reaction shifted from outrage on my behalf to strategic thinking. This is about more than just your family, Jess, he said thoughtfully. From these financial records, it looks like your father's been moving money between family trusts to fund his own investments. That could potentially be illegal, especially if he's been doing it without proper disclosure to the beneficiaries. Sam's background in financial software gave him insights I might have missed. He pointed out patterns in the transactions that suggested my father had been using family money to cover losses in risky investments, all while maintaining the image of the successful patriarch who generously supported his extended family. We should talk to a lawyer before you confront them, Sam advised. Not just about your trust fund, but about all of this. There could be serious legal implications. I agreed, and over the following days, while pretending to my parents that I was licking my wounds from the Thanksgiving exclusion, I consulted with a financial lawyer who specialized in family trusts. Her assessment confirmed our suspicions. My father had been breaching his fiduciary duty as trustee, and there was enough evidence to potentially remove him from his position of control over multiple family trusts. Meanwhile, Amanda was gathering her own intelligence. As my brother's wife, she had access to family conversations I didn't. She reported that my exclusion from Thanksgiving had been explained away to relatives as me going through a difficult phase and needing time to mature. The narrative painted me as unstable and ungrateful, further evidence of the family's pattern of controlling the story. Most surprisingly, Amanda discovered that my cousin Eliza had experienced similar treatment years earlier when she'd wanted to attend art school instead of pursuing the business degree my father had recommended. She'd eventually capitulated to family pressure, abandoned her artistic dreams, and now worked unhappily at an accounting firm. Eliza might prove to be another ally in our growing resistance. As Christmas approached, we refined our plan. The annual Walker Christmas dinner would be held at my parents' home on December 23rd. I would arrive unexpectedly. With Sam, Amanda would ensure Michael couldn't leave by driving separately, and we would present the evidence to the entire assembled family. The stakes felt enormously high. I was risking not just my relationship with my parents, but potentially dividing the extended family. Yet the alternative, allowing this cycle of manipulation to continue unchecked, seemed far worse. 3 days before the planned confrontation, an unexpected complication arose. My mother called, her voice overly bright. "Jessica, darling, your father and I have been thinking. It was perhaps too harsh to exclude you from Thanksgiving. We'd like you to join us for the Christmas dinner this year." The timing was suspicious. "Really? What changed your minds?" "Well," my mother hesitated, "we've been discussing your future, and we think it's time to bring you more fully into the family discussions. Your father has some ideas about your career that he'd like to share." Translation: they wanted to reassert control. Perhaps they'd noticed Amanda's slightly different behavior, or maybe this was simply the next phase in their manipulation, the reconciliation that would make me grateful and compliant again. "That sounds wonderful, Mom," I said, matching her false brightness. "Can I bring Sam?" Her pause told me everything. "Oh well, this dinner is really just for family, dear. Perhaps Sam can join us for New Year's." "I understand," I replied, letting her think she'd won this round. "I'm looking forward to it." After hanging up, I immediately called Amanda. "They've invited me to Christmas dinner." "They're suspicious." "Or they're setting up their next move," she suggested. "Either way, this might work in our favor. You won't need to crash the dinner now." She was right. This unexpected invitation simplified our plan logistically, even if it suggested my parents might be preparing their own countermoves. We adjusted accordingly, with Sam agreeing to wait nearby in case I needed support. The night before the Christmas dinner, I couldn't sleep. I reviewed our plan repeatedly, imagined every possible reaction from my family, and questioned whether I was doing the right thing. Was I destroying my family in the name of truth, or was I finally breaking a toxic cycle that had damaged 3 generations of Walkers? In the early hours of the morning, I reread my grandmother's letter, "Truth sets us free." With those words guiding me, I finally drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever came next. I have to tell you, the anxiety I felt that night was unlike anything I've experienced. Have you ever been on the verge of a confrontation that could change everything? It's terrifying and empowering at the same time. If you're finding this family drama as intense as I did living through it, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The next part of this story takes everything to another level. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to family traditions that were toxic. Now let me tell you about the Christmas dinner that changed everything. The Walker family Christmas dinner had always been a carefully orchestrated event. Crystal glassware that only appeared for special occasions, the family's heirloom silver, and my mother's prized Royal Doulton china set the stage for what my father called a celebration of family legacy. This year was no different on the surface. The 15-foot Fraser fir in the living room was impeccably decorated. The house smelled of roasting turkey and my mother's signature cranberry orange relish, and seasonal classical music played softly throughout the house. I arrived precisely on time, dressed in a sophisticated emerald green dress that projected confidence rather than the compliance my parents expected. My mother greeted me with an air kiss and a once-over that told me she approved of my appearance, if not my recent behavior. "Jessica, you look lovely," she said, guiding me toward the living room where pre-dinner drinks were being served. "Everyone's so pleased you could join us after all." The subtext was clear. I should be grateful for the invitation. In previous years, I would have accepted this framing, but tonight I simply smiled and followed her into the room where my extended family was gathered. My father stood by the fireplace holding court as usual with my brother and several male cousins clustered around him. He paused mid-sentence when he saw me, his expression shifting rapidly from surprise to careful neutrality. "Jessica," he said, with a nod that managed to be both acknowledging and dismissive. "Glad you could make it. We were just discussing Michael's new position on the hospital board." "Congratulations, Michael," I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't blame my brother for the family dynamics he'd been raised to perpetuate. "That's quite an accomplishment." Michael looked momentarily uncomfortable, caught between his usual role of accepting praise and his recent awareness, thanks to Amanda, of how these family conversations typically excluded me. "Thanks, Jess. It's not that big a deal, really." My father frowned slightly at Michael's downplaying of his achievement. "Nonsense. It's a significant honor, especially for someone your age. The Walker name carries weight in this community for a reason." I accepted a glass of wine from a passing server and took a strategic position where I could observe the room. Amanda entered a few minutes later, looking elegant in a burgundy dress, our eyes meeting briefly in silent confirmation that our plan was proceeding. She'd already hidden copies of the most damning documents in her purse, ready for the moment we'd chosen. Dinner was announced at 7, and we processed into the dining room. According to the usual unspoken hierarchy, my father at the head of the table, my mother at the foot, Michael and Amanda to my father's right, and I was seated beside my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, who had always been something of an outsider himself within the family structure. The first two courses proceeded with the usual Walker dinner conversation, discussion of business successes, subtle competitive comparisons between family members, and careful avoidance of anything controversial or emotional. I participated minimally, saving my energy for what was to come. As the main course was served, my father stood for his traditional Christmas toast. This was the moment we had planned for. Another year of Walker family prosperity. He began raising his glass. Each year, I look at this table and see the strength of our legacy. A legacy built on certain values that have served us well for generations. What values would those be? "Dad," I interrupted, my voice clear and steady. "Manipulation, deception, financial control." A shocked silence fell over the table. My father's face darkened with anger at the unprecedented interruption of his toast. "Jessica, this is hardly the time. Actually, I think it's exactly the time," I continued, standing to match his position. "We're all here celebrating the Walker family legacy. But I've recently discovered parts of that legacy that I don't think everyone at this table is aware of." My mother attempted intervention. "Jessica, please sit down. We can discuss whatever's bothering you privately after dinner." That's always been the approach, hasn't it, Mom? Keep things private, control the narrative, make sure no one has all the information. I looked around the table at my relatives' confused and uncomfortable expressions. "I apologize for disrupting dinner, but I think we're long overdue for some transparency in this family." Amanda stood, then moving to my side in a show of solidarity that clearly shocked Michael. She removed the documents from her purse and began distributing them around the table. "What is the meaning of this?" my father demanded, his voice rising as pages of financial records and journal entries were passed from hand to hand. "These documents show how you've been manipulating the family for years, Dad," I explained calmly. "How you've controlled access to family trusts, including mine that I never knew existed. How you've used family money to cover your own investment losses. How you've deliberately excluded certain family members like me, like Aunt Catherine, who none of us younger cousins have ever even met, to maintain your control." My Uncle Robert was the first to respond after reviewing the documents. "Richard, is this true? These transactions from the family trust?" "This is a private family matter that Jessica has grossly misunderstood," my father interrupted sharply. "This dinner is not the place." "It's all true," came a voice from the dining room doorway. We all turned to see my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, and the family member whose home had hosted Thanksgiving. She walked into the room slowly, her expression resolute. I've known about some of this for years, but I was too afraid to speak up. Mother showed me her journals before she died, but I didn't have the courage Jessica has. The revelation that my aunt had known and kept silent created another wave of shock around the table. My cousin Eliza, seated near the foot of the table, was reading through the documents with increasing agitation. Is this why you fought so hard against my going to art school, Uncle Richard? Because it didn't fit with your vision of the Walker legacy. Her voice cracked with emotion. I gave up my dreams because you made me believe I'd be letting the family down if I pursued them. The dinner had devolved into exactly the scene I'd anticipated: confusion, anger, accusations, and revelations cascading around the table. My father attempted to regain control, his face flushed with rage. This is preposterous. Jessica has clearly fabricated these documents out of spite because she wasn't included in Thanksgiving. This childish behavior only proves what your mother and I have been saying about your lack of maturity. I remained calm in the face of his anger. The financial records can be verified independently, Dad. Grandmother left copies with her attorney as well. As for the journals and recordings, those speak for themselves. My brother Michael had been suspiciously quiet during the confrontation. Now he looked directly at our father. Dad, is it true about Jessica's trust fund? You told me she didn't have one, that grandfather only established one for me. My father's hesitation was damning. Before he could formulate a response, Amanda spoke up. Michael, there's more you don't know. Your father has been using the conditions of your trust to control your career choices. The reason he pushed so hard against the California job wasn't about family tradition. It was because the trust conditions give him discretionary control until you're established in a family-approved career in Boston. The betrayal on Michael's face was painful to witness. For the first time, he was experiencing what I had felt upon discovering these truths. The careful facade of family unity was crumbling rapidly as more relatives reviewed the documents and began asking their own questions. My mother, ever the defender of family appearances, made one last attempt to salvage the situation. Perhaps we should all take some time to process this information before jumping to conclusions. These are complex family matters that have been deliberately kept secret to maintain control. I finished for her. I'm not here to destroy the family, Mom. I'm here because I believe we deserve better than this. All of us, even you and Dad, deserve better than relationships built on manipulation and fear. The dinner ended abruptly after that. Some relatives left immediately, too uncomfortable to remain. Others stayed, forming small groups to discuss what they'd learned. My father retreated to his study, refusing to engage further. My mother fluttered anxiously between groups, trying ineffectively to minimize the damage. In the midst of the chaos, Michael approached me, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you come to me first, Jess? Before all this, would you have believed me? I asked simply. He looked away, and I had my answer. Without the evidence presented publicly, without the shock of discovery forcing him to confront the truth, he would have chosen the comfortable reality our parents had constructed. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing in the foyer with Amanda and Sam, who had arrived as planned when I texted him that the confrontation had occurred. Uncle Robert approached us, looking years older than he had at the start of dinner. Your grandmother would be proud of you, he said quietly. She tried to change things in her own way, but she wasn't as brave as you. His words were the first indication that what I'd done, despite the pain and chaos it had caused, might ultimately lead to something better. The days following the Christmas dinner confrontation were a blur of family chaos. My father refused to speak to me directly, communicating through increasingly desperate emails from his attorney, attempting to get me to sign confidentiality agreements regarding family private matters. I forwarded everything to my own lawyer, who advised me to maintain documentation but not respond. My mother vacillated between pleading phone calls, begging me to fix the situation before it destroys the family, and icy silence when her appeals failed to move me. The extended family fractured into factions, those who supported exposing the truth, those who preferred the comfort of the old hierarchy, and those caught uncomfortably in between. Most surprising was Michael's reaction. After his initial shock and hurt, he dove into investigating the family finances himself. As a surgeon accustomed to precision and truth, once he saw the evidence, he couldn't unsee it. 3 days after Christmas, he showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking exhausted. I've been going through everything, he said without preamble when I opened the door. Financial records, emails, trust documents. It's worse than what you showed at dinner. I invited him in, and we sat at my kitchen table, the morning light creating a strangely peaceful backdrop for such a heavy conversation. I should have seen it, he continued, running a hand through his hair. All those years I thought I was earning my place through hard work and achievement. But they were grooming me to take over the system, weren't they? To be the next controller. I think so, I agreed gently. But you don't have to accept that role, Michael. That's the whole point, we have choices. He looked at me with new respect. How did you see it when I couldn't? We grew up in the same house. We didn't grow up with the same treatment, I reminded him. Being on the outside sometimes gives you a clearer perspective. Michael stayed for hours as we talked through our childhoods from our vastly different experiences. For perhaps the first time we were speaking as equals, neither of us positioned above or below the other in the family hierarchy. By the time he left, something fundamental had shifted between us, a foundation for a genuine sibling relationship rather than the competitive dynamic our parents had fostered. Amanda became my closest ally during this period. Her relief at having the secrets exposed was palpable. Thomas asked me yesterday why we always have to be so careful around Grandpa, she told me during one of our now regular coffee meetings. I told him, we don't anymore, that families should be places where you can be yourself. It felt so liberating to say that to him. The wider impact of the revelation rippled outward. Cousin Eliza enrolled in art classes for the first time in a decade. Uncle Robert initiated a formal audit of all the family trusts, discovering even more financial improprieties than we'd initially uncovered. My long-lost Aunt Catherine was contacted and invited to reconnect with the family she'd been separated from for 30 years. As for me, I worked with my lawyer to take control of my trust fund, removing my father as trustee. The process was complicated but ultimately successful, giving me financial independence that transformed my relationship to the family power structure. I also began researching my grandmother's life more deeply, piecing together the quiet resistance she had maintained within a system she couldn't openly challenge. 6 weeks after the Christmas confrontation, my father suffered a minor heart attack. The doctor attributed it to stress, and while he recovered physically, something fundamental had broken in him. The man who had ruled the Walker family with absolute authority for decades suddenly seemed diminished, his power base eroded by truth. During his recovery, I visited him in the hospital, unsure of my reception, but feeling it was important to demonstrate that exposing the truth hadn't been about revenge. My mother was there, of course, looking worn and anxious. "Jessica," she said stiffly when I entered the room, "your father needs rest." From the hospital bed, my father regarded me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It's fine, Margaret. I want to talk to her." My mother hesitated, then gathered her purse. "I'll get some coffee." When she'd gone, my father and I looked at each other in silence for a long moment. "You've destroyed everything I built," he finally said, his voice lacking its usual force. "I exposed what you built, Dad." "There's a difference." I sat in the chair beside his bed. "The family didn't need to be controlled to be strong." He shook his head slightly. "You don't understand. My father ruled with an iron fist. I saw what happened to those who didn't fall in line, like Catherine. I thought I was creating a better system, one that used incentives rather than punishment. But it was still about control, I pointed out. Just more sophisticated control. He didn't deny it. Instead, he asked a question that surprised me. Do you hate me? I considered my answer carefully. No, I don't hate you. I think you're a product of what was done to you, and you didn't know another way. But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean it had to continue. When my mother returned, she found us in a civil, if not warm, conversation. Something had shifted not toward reconciliation exactly, but toward a kind of truth that might eventually make a new relationship possible. As winter turned to spring, the Walker family began a painful but necessary transformation. My father stepped down from his position as head of the family trusts, allowing a professional fiduciary to take over. Family gatherings became less formal and more genuine, though not without awkward moments, as we all learned new ways of relating to each other. Some relationships couldn't be repaired. My father and I maintained a careful distance, our interactions civil but strained. My mother struggled to find her identity outside of her role as the patriarch's loyal supporter. But other connections flourished in unexpected ways. Michael and I developed the sibling bond we'd never had. Amanda and I became true friends rather than polite in-laws. Even extended family relationships deepened as the artificial hierarchies dissolved. Perhaps most meaningfully, I found myself becoming a mentor of sorts to my niece Emily Michael and Amanda's two-spirited daughter. At 7 years old, she was already showing signs of the questioning nature that had made me an outsider in the family. Now, instead of having that spirit crushed, she had an aunt who encouraged her curiosity and independence. One evening in April, as we worked together on a science project in Michael and Amanda's kitchen, Emily asked me, Aunt Jessica, "Is it true you made Grandpa and Grandma stop being bossy to everyone?" I smiled at her simplification of months of family turmoil. I think I helped our family learn that there are better ways to be together than telling each other what to do all the time. She considered this seriously, then nodded. I'm glad you did. Dad laughs more now. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. In that moment, I knew that despite all the pain and conflict, exposing the truth had been worth it. The cycle that had damaged 3 generations of Walkers had been broken, and Emily's generation would grow up in a family where authenticity was valued over appearance and love wasn't conditional on compliance. 1 year after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, the Walker family gathered again, not at my parents' formal dining table, but at Michael and Amanda's home, where the atmosphere was relaxed and welcoming. The transformation in our family dynamic was still a work in progress, but the differences were striking. My father, looking older but somehow less burdened, sat in a corner of the living room with Uncle Robert, their lifetime of competition giving way to a more genuine brotherly relationship. My mother, initially lost without her role as the perfect patriarch's wife, had surprised everyone by returning to her long-abandoned interest in landscape painting. She'd even displayed some of her work at a local community art show, supported enthusiastically by cousin Eliza, who was now pursuing her own artistic career. Aunt Catherine, my father's estranged sister, had been fully welcomed back into the family fold. Her unsuitable husband of 30 years turned out to be a kind, thoughtful man who quickly became a favorite with the younger generation of Walkers. Their children and grandchildren, cousins we'd never known, added new dimensions to our family gatherings. As for me, the past year had brought unexpected changes. With access to my trust fund, I'd been able to leave my corporate job and co-found a tech startup with Sam focused on developing financial literacy applications. The irony wasn't lost on me using my Walker inheritance to create tools that helped others understand and take control of their finances. Sam and I had gotten engaged in the fall, a development that would once have triggered my father's interference regarding the suitability of my choice. Instead, when I announced our engagement, my father had simply said, "He seems to make you happy," which from him was tantamount to a blessing. As I helped Amanda set out dessert, she nudged me gently. "Look at them," she said, nodding toward the children, playing a board game in the adjoining room. Thomas and Emily were teaching the rules to their younger cousins with none of the power dynamics that would have characterized such interactions in the past. No hierarchy, no golden child, no scapegoat, just kids being kids. That alone makes everything worth it, I agreed, feeling a deep satisfaction. Michael joined us, slipping an arm around Amanda's waist. Dad just asked me if I'd considered taking that position in California, he said with a hint of wonder in his voice. The one he practically forbade me from pursuing 3 years ago. What did you say? I asked, curious about this evidence of my father's continuing evolution. I told him we're happy here now, but I appreciated him asking. Michael shook his head slightly. A year ago, I wouldn't have believed this conversation could happen. Later, as the evening wound down, I found myself alone with my grandmother's journal, which I'd brought to share with Aunt Catherine. Reading through it again, I was struck by a passage I hadn't fully appreciated before. The true legacy of a family isn't in its name or its wealth, but in the courage each generation finds to be more honest and loving than the last. Progress isn't perfect or linear. It comes in fits and starts in small acts of bravery that may not bear fruit immediately, but plant seeds for the future. My grandmother had planted those seeds decades ago, hoping they would eventually grow into something better. Against all odds they had. The Walker family would never be perfect. We carried too much history, too many ingrained patterns to achieve some idealized vision of family harmony. My relationship with my parents remained complicated, a complex mix of lingering hurt, cautious forgiveness, and gradual understanding. Some family members still occasionally slipped into old habits of hierarchy and control. But we were learning, growing, trying, and that made all the difference. The truth had indeed set us free, not in one dramatic moment, but in the 1,000 small moments that followed, each a choice to relate to each other with more authenticity and less fear. As guests began to leave, my father approached me, something unusual in his expression. I found this while going through some old papers, he said, handing me a yellowed envelope. It's a letter your grandmother wrote to me before she died. I never showed it to anyone. I took it surprised by this unexpected offering. She saw things more clearly than I gave her credit for, he added quietly before moving away to say his goodbyes to other family members. Later that night, in the privacy of my apartment, I read the letter. It was a gentle but firm indictment of the family system my father had perpetuated, and a plea for him to break the cycle for the sake of his children, especially me, whom she described as the truth teller the family needs but may not. Welcome. She had seen me clearly all those years ago, recognized something in me that even I hadn't fully understood until forced to confront it. And though it had taken decades longer than she'd hoped, her vision for a more honest family had finally begun to materialize. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over. There would always be new challenges, new temptations to fall back into old patterns, but we had crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. The Walker family secret was out, not just the financial manipulations and power plays, but the deeper secret that families don't have to function through control and hierarchy. That authentic connection, though, messier and more vulnerable, creates stronger bonds than perfect appearances ever could. As I prepared to start my own branch of the Walker family tree with Sam, I carry my grandmother's wisdom with me. The greatest inheritance you can leave is the courage to face the truth and the compassion to use that truth for healing, rather than harm. That's a legacy worth preserving. I want to thank you all for staying with me through this entire family journey. Has anyone else experienced similar family revelations that changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life family drama stories with lessons we can all learn from. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that family karma is real and that standing up for the truth while difficult can lead to healing across generations. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to break the cycles that no longer serve anyone. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.